Hi, everybody. We're so glad you could join us tonight. My name is Charlene Margot, and I'm co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture. And it brings you this program, the Parent Education Series, now in its 19th season. We are honored and delighted to have back with us tonight Dr. Samir Handujah, one of our very favorite presenters, who's going to be talking to you about parenting tech-savvy kids, promoting safe and healthy decisions online. We know this is a topic that is really important to you as parents, and it's really important to us also as parent educators, so we're really glad to be bringing you this program. Please join me, everybody, in a really warm welcome for our friend, Dr. Samir Handujah. Take it away, Samir.
Thank you, Charlene. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming this evening. We definitely want to make sure that we are respectful of your time and provide you with quality information that you can apply in your homes. These times are very challenging, and as a parent, as an educator, I know that even me on a daily basis, wrestle with many of these issues that occur at the intersection of youth and technology. With that said, though, I still want to stay encouraged, and I want to believe very positively about the power of technology to help set our kids up for personal and professional success. And I imagine, based on your location and what you see around you when it comes to the businesses, that you probably lean in that direction as well. You understand that it's a tool, and we want to make sure we're using that tool for good, and we want to make sure that we continue to come alongside our kids and support them and educate them and inspire them to leverage it in positive ways. So with that, I'm going to share my slides. Please know that we can get you these slides, and so there's no need to furiously scribble down notes. And then additionally, I'm such a good friend of the Parent Venture, and so now those of you who are here, I'm friends with you too. I'd like to call myself that, which simply means you've taken the time to meet up with me for 45 minutes to an hour, and so I want you to know that if you reach out to me in the future with some sort of help requests, whether it's to try to get some harassing or hateful content taken down from a platform, or whether it's advice related to how you can help your kids grow in this specific area, I'm happy to have that conversation with you. Don't hesitate to drop me an email and I will get back to you. So with that, let me share my slides. And as I'm doing so, I want to give a shout out to Michelle Raymond because she's helping us with translation tonight, and I just deeply appreciate that. All right, so a lot to cover, and as you just saw for a second, I first want to start with the backdrop. And the backdrop is, we remember our previous Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy. He issued multiple advisories over the last 12 to 18 months focused on social media, focused on youth, well-being, mental health, loneliness. And so these topics have become flashpoints for so many individuals, of course, for us parents and guardians, but also for other stakeholders, whether it's nonprofits, legislators and government officials, whether it's, of course, schools and platforms. And without a doubt, I would say more needs to be done. And we're trying to rise up and we're trying to stay proactive, but it's also hard. I have to be gracious to myself. I encourage you to be gracious to yourself because you're doing your best, I would imagine, as you try to stay involved, try to stay educated, and try to continue to communicate with your kids about positives and negatives related to social media and technology in general. With that said, though, thinking about the fact that this is on so many people's radar, I'm hoping for, of course, more resources and attention to be given to this topic because it feels like an inflection point, and perhaps you'll agree. And related to that, we've alluded slightly to the fact that legislators and politicians are wanting to do more, and they are leaning in the direction of more and more of these sort of prohibitive sort of approaches, which you and I, if we're chatting over coffee, we could see some positives, but also we could see some negatives. I think about in California, SB 976, which focuses on recommendation algorithms, in apps to make them, pretty sticky, where the kid just wants to keep coming back more and more and more. And also how, maybe kids shouldn't be receiving notifications between the hours of, let's say, 10 and 6 a.m. because obviously they might lose sleep and could disrupt them. And of course, we need parents to have some sort of dashboard or controls so that they can restrict and so they can monitor and just have a little bit more involvement in what their youth are doing online. And then, there's AB 2273, I believe, which is focused on privacy related to how youth by default should be granted the highest privacy settings within the apps and games that they enjoy. And that makes sense to me and probably makes sense to you as well. So with all that said, I think legislation has a role to play. Some of these are being challenged a little bit in courts, and we'll also hear about, COSPA, the Kids Online Safety and Privacy Act, and what happens in the next legislative session. But for me, I'm wondering, okay, you have these laws on the books. Are they going to be the strongest deterrent? And maybe we'd say kids respond emotionally, kids respond spontaneously. So maybe they're not going to stop for a moment and pause and rationally think about the laws that have been passed, about what they should do, what they should not do, what their parents now can do, or what the platform needs to do, et cetera. It still feels like kids are gonna act sometimes in untoward, inappropriate fashion. So with that said, it's still on my shoulders and your shoulders as youth supervising adults to care and to be involved and to act in very intentional ways through specific strategies, which we'll talk about today. And then just one last piece related to the backdrop, and I'll be brief here, but I'd ask you to remember what it was like growing up. For me, man, I struggled so much. I struggled in elementary and middle school, and a little bit less, but still in high school. And I struggled with, well, academic pressures, heavy academic pressures, and kids will still tell you that is a massive, massive burden on their shoulders. And then emotions and hormones and crushes and wanting to be liked and wanting to be loved and wanting to be in a relationship, maybe some heartbreak, maybe parental stresses, whether it's unemployment, underemployment, whether it's fighting and leading to divorces and broken families and energy levels and just there's so much going on in the lives of youth. And so I would ask us to be gracious again, because many times, they bring up a technology issue and all of a sudden we're dismissive or judgmental or critical, and we don't tend to remember about all the other things that are just spinning in their lives and just a heavy, heavy weight. And again, hopefully we remember that weight when it was on our shoulders. So thinking about platforms in general, I don't ask you to get incredibly proficient with every single platform or game or new console or device. I don't know if that's the best way to use your time. Sure, I'd love for you to have some familiarity, but if you just concentrate on what it takes to raise a decent human being, I think you're well over, the way there. I feel that all of the lessons that you're teaching them and trying to inculcate in them will lead to better decision making, both offline and online. And as I'm speaking, I do want to remind myself orally that since Michelle is translating, I should slow down just a little bit. So let me be mindful to do that. Online harms. So we hear about them and we think about predators often, but the chances of predation, while it does happen, grooming, etc., are much rarer as it compares to various forms of harassment and victimization. So let me share with you a few data points that popped for me. First off, on the right side of your chart, you see that about 1 out of every 2 youth will tell you that they have been bullied online, either in the last month or in their lifetime. Obviously, lifetime, little higher percentage. The left side of the chart is a reference point, and you can see that 3 out of 4 youth will say, yeah, over the course of my lifetime, I've been bullied at school. So that's still something that's very, very prevalent, and we don't want to neglect that as it relates to peer relationships. This is data based on youth across the United States, a nationally representative sample of middle schoolers and high schoolers. And then some more data points, just a few things that I want to bring to your attention. Again, we'll get you these slides so you can review them at your leisure. But I think it's interesting that 16% said that someone else posted mean names or comments about them online with a sexual meaning. So are we talking about sexual harassment, sexual cruelty? What exactly is that? And I feel like that's something that we need to dive into a little bit more. 14% have been targeted because of their race or their color. 9% have been targeted because of their religion. So the point here is that kids are being attacked because of identity characteristics, aspects about them that they cannot change, which is so saddening for me to see. And in many jurisdictions, that's considered a hate crime. And so we have to remind our youth about the weight of their words. A couple other things, 23% of youth, so almost 1 out of 4, said someone repeatedly contacted them via text or online, again, in an unwanted way. Someone stalked them online, it was about 14%, and about 10% said someone tracked or monitored them or their activities after they were told to stop. Kept going. So clearly these are privacy violations. This tends to bring about feelings of fear, lack of safety, and of course that would compromise your well-being, how well you do in school, your attitude, and other sort of psychosomatic factors. Who did they tell? 7 out of 10 talked to a parent, which you see on the left side of the chart. But if you look at the middle, 16% talked to a school counselor, 14% a teacher, 14% a principal or assistant principal, and 12% someone else at school. Unfortunately, those low numbers have stayed pretty consistent over years and years and years that we've studied this. Kids are very, very hesitant to talk to someone at school, which means that we as the adult at home have got to continue to convey to them that, look, come to us, give us a chance, trust us. We're not going to freak out. We're not going to fly off the handle. We will try to be, open ears in terms of just listening and hearing what's going on in your life because we care so much about you. A couple other quick forms of harm I want to be on your radar one is called digital dating abuse. Digital dating abuse. It's similar to dating violence. Dating violence offline, but we're hoping that our youth are not dealing with this online or offline. What we found in our research involving middle schoolers and high schoolers are that 14% were victims of offline dating violence. 1 out of 10 were victims of online dating violence. For example, I asked my partner, can I please have your password so I can log in as you to make sure you're not talking to another guy in private messages? Or I'm going to keep your phone with me physically when we're out on a date because I don't want you to be distracted by it. Or I'm going to post something about you online just to get you to dress in a certain way that I like or act sexually towards me in a certain way that I like. Just these passive aggressive forms of harm. That's what we're talking about. And it's not the majority of youth, but 1 out of 10, I wouldn't want that to happen to my teenager or my middle schooler. Here's the kicker. 4 out of 5 of those who have been victimized online were also victimized offline. And 63% of those who were victimized offline were also victimized online, meaning there's a strong link. So yes, I could be asking for your password and going through your phone today to make sure you're not talking to another boy, but I could push you up against a wall tomorrow. I'm being a little bit dramatic there, but here's the bottom line. We're not having enough conversations about healthy romantic relationships with our kids. And maybe we're trying to kick that can down the road, but our kids want to be in relationships starting in, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. I know it sounds so silly, but I remember my first crushes. It was 3rd grade. And maybe you can think about yours. And so that starts to become a pressure and becomes a growing desire, even though kids don't really have any idea of what they're asking for and what they want. And then sexting briefly. 1 out of 4 have received a nude. 14% have sent a nude. 24% have been asked for a nude. And 1 out of 10 have asked somebody else for a nude. So these numbers have stayed steady. They're not spiraling out of control, but they're, of course, concerning. And then we think about sextortion as one of the biggest negative fallouts from sexting, even though a kid might rationalize it as flirting, deepening intimacy, just what kids do these days. It leads to these heavy, heavy consequences. And so, this is just one example of a platform where sextortion is happening or has happened in the past. And of course, they're working to improve their systems just to make sure that it doesn't happen again, ideally. But the point is that a kid could be blackmailed because their nudes get into the hands of somebody who then threatens them and says, I'm going to send this to your school or to your parents unless you pay me, in this case, $500. So a little bit concerning, obviously. And again, platforms realize that this is a huge priority area and they are devoting resources to it. But sometimes, we still see instances. All right, strategies and solutions. Let's dive in. Communication, we know it matters so much. And maybe I'm preaching to the choir because you're here, you're giving me your time and you clearly care about your kids and their online activities. But, specifically, have you been able to go online with them, to play their favorite game on their gaming console or on mobile? Maybe just a few minutes on Snapchat or Instagram if they're using it, or even on YouTube. they can teach you. And if you start early, that is ideal because it feels like they're just so skilled at such a young age with the devices and with the technology. And then you and I, we should watch our own words because sometimes we do say mean things to our partner, to a coworker, to a relative on the phone, or even a friend. Maybe we sort of curse out a athlete when they make a mistake and your favorite team loses. We've just got to call it out, whether we're cranky or irritable or mad, and just say, "Oh, son, daughter, I'm so sorry. We don't act like that, and I shouldn't have said that, and I made a mistake. Do you forgive me?" And right then and there, your kid knows that, okay, we have standards in our household. It's okay to make a mistake, but we need to make things right. And we need to do all that we can to not do it again because it's wrong. And when you see it in TV, reality TV, when you see it on sitcoms, movies, I hope you pause and just say, "Dear heavens, that crossed the line. And I can't believe they said that." And I know that, he got his buddies to laugh, but we don't get close to the line. We stay far away from the line because that was wrong. And you could see how it hurt that other person with how their face fell, with how their body language changed, even if they didn't say anything. And then family standards. I'm sure you have standards in your home, but how often do you keep coming back to them? In our home, I made the sign with the help of my partner, Hinduja family values, and we worked together to figure out, okay, what do we want to build our family upon in terms of these foundational, like cornerstone principles? This is what we came up with, and it hangs in our family room. And as my kids live life, they're pretty young, but as they live life and have experiences with peers, I'm able to point to some of these values and say, "I'm so sorry that happened to you. But remember, one of our family values is courage. And, I want you to be brave. I want you to be able to stand up for yourself. And maybe you could say this. I know you'd be nervous. I know it's a little scary, but again, we're all about courage. We're Hindujas. We can do this." And so if you can keep coming back to your family values, it just provides like these anchors. And I think that we need anchors, and we'll get to anchors a little bit more later on in our presentation, only because life is sometimes an emotional roller coaster, and we don't want our kids to be a feather floating on the breeze. We want them to have some anchors, and values can help with that. So thinking about questions parents should ask, we have a resource, and we'll get it to you. And it goes through initially very innocuous, innocent type questions before it goes into the more probing or sensitive questions. So it's much more than just these that you see on your screen. We'll make sure we get you this resource. And we've heard good feedback from parents and guardians about how it's helped them to initiate conversations and dialogue, which is so key. So again, we'll get that to you as well as many other resources. And then let's talk about empathy for a second. This is a picture of empathy following a school shooting. Okay, great. That's what we want to see, but you and I, we want to see empathy much more like a default. It shouldn't take a school shooting. We want students to care about each other more naturally. Now, I could spend a whole hour focused only on empathy. Let me briefly share with you the research and then go through a couple of strategies, and then you can follow up with me with some more or for some more. We studied this. We published a paper on it in the Journal of Early Adolescence, and what we found, students with low empathy, they're about 1.8 times as likely to bully someone in school in the last month and over 2 times as likely to cyberbully someone in the last month. But those kids with high levels of empathy were over 2 times less likely to bully at school and almost 3 times, 2.7 times less likely to cyberbully someone. Bottom line, empathy matters. And it was neat for the research to clearly show that as we studied it across youth in the US. Here are my favorite shows where the protagonist, the main character, is all about empathy. And of course, some are catered for younger kids, some are catered for older kids. You're welcome to message me and tell me a little bit about your kid. And I can give you more specific recommendations other than these. But again, you'll get these slides. You can look over them. The point is, when they watch a show, when you watch a movie with them, are you having a conversation with them as you put them to bed, as you drive them to school the next day, as you take them to soccer practice, about what are the takeaways? How can you apply that to your life? How are you inspired by the main character? That's the point, having those conversations. Here are my favorite books. Again, you'll get these slides so you can review these. but I'm happy to also follow up with you. Some of them you've read, and I was chatting earlier with Charlene and Bev, and we were just talking about how it's so cool if your kids love reading, and maybe they'll get to that point if they're not there yet. But I remember I remember stories that I read growing up, and the soft-heartedness of the main character, how sensitive they were. I still think about that today, and it helps me to make decisions about caring towards others. This is just an example of an activity from a school, but you can tweak it how you wish. The point is that a student is given an assignment of interviewing someone that they would never sit with at lunch, that just has always seemed different. And you can use a search engine to find interview questions for middle school or high school students or elementary school students. And some of them are going to be, who is your favorite character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? But then others might be a little bit more like probing and asking for a tiny bit of vulnerability. But here's the thing, as we know, if we're fans of Brene Brown and other scholars, vulnerability brings us together and gets kids to realize that they have much more in common than they do that might seem different on the outside. And then ideally, they care more meaningfully about other kids who might not have the same background or culture or skin color or looks or religion. I'm a big fan of Tim Tebow, and I know he's a bit of a controversial figure in some circles, but he does do a few really cool humanitarian things. For example, he organizes these proms every spring for youth with special needs, and he enlists the help of youth without special needs to come and serve as waiters or ushers or fellow dance partners. And those kids, they develop true meaningful friendships with the other kids who do have special needs because of the fact that they're spending 6-7 hours together in this afternoon and evening event. And I love that. And the takeaway for me is, how are we intentionally putting our kids in situations where their hearts can be softened, where they can remember that they are very fortunate and others are less fortunate, and they have a role to play to brighten other people's day, to lift their spirits. You could do Habitat for Humanity. There's tons of community service activities in our neighborhoods. We just have to look for them and then take our kids. Let's not always be protecting them from sadness. When I was growing up, I went to a lot of emerging countries to do various missions trips, and my heart was softened and even broken by the sadness and pain and poverty that I saw. And that has helped me to become someone who does a lot of humanitarian projects now that I have resources. And I feel like we don't need to take our kids overseas. There's a lot of sadness around us, but let's put them in situations where their hearts can be softened and maybe even broken. That's how we build empathy. Let's switch gears and talk about resilience. I think about a bathtub full of water and a rubber ducky in that bathtub full of water. And if you push it down under the surface, what happens? It pops back up. That's what we want our kids to be, because most forms of harassment are not physical. I would not advocate for resilience if your kid is being physically assaulted, if they're being threatened online. That's a criminal act. But most forms of harassment are name calling, insults, exclusion, rejection, those sorts of things. And we want our kids to just have a toolbox of skills to handle all of that, because they will be exposed to it when they leave your nest and they go to college and they go into the workforce and they deal with colleagues and bosses and in-laws. And you need a lot of resilience to survive in this world, but we have to help them get practice. I could spend another hour on this topic, but I only have time for a little bit. I'll talk about the research, and then I'll talk about some strategies, and then please do follow up with me if you need additional strategies and solutions for resilience. This slide simply points out that as we studied this, those kids with the highest levels of resilience, when they were cyberbullied, they engaged in pro-social responses, which you see on the right side of the chart, reported it to the school, reported it to the site or the app, changed their screen name, called the police, deleted the account, blocked them. But those kids with the lowest levels of resilience, on the left side of the chart, you see that they did nothing. They suffered silently. And you would never want your kid to just take it. You would want them to remember their agency and their autonomy to do something about it, to protect themselves from bad experiences online. And so we've got to continue to work to cultivate resilience. One of the examples and strategies that I always love to share is out of the University of Pennsylvania, and it's called the ABC model: adversity, beliefs, and consequences. Adversity, beliefs, and consequences. This works as follows. We face adversity. Our kids face adversity. Immediately, we adopt and they adopt certain beliefs to help us to reconcile that stress, come to terms with that form of adversity. If we didn't, we would just get stuck in the heavy cloud of emotions that descended upon us, and we just would not know what to do. But thankfully, our brain adapts and is able to explain it away. Again, come to terms with it so we can just keep moving forward. However, some of those beliefs that our kids adopt, and sometimes even we adopt, they undermine resiliency, and they lead to these problematic consequences, such as acting out, lashing out, struggling then in school, self-harm, some of these other like really problematic outcomes simply because the belief we adopted was problematic. So let's talk about this in sort of a practical example. In this situation, let's just say that I'm a girl. I see a post on Instagram, which seems to suggest that I was not invited to a sleepover, and all of my friends were. Okay, that is my adversity. So then what are the beliefs I immediately adopt to rationalize this, to explain it away? Well, it might go like this. Oh my goodness, they had a sleepover without me? Cannot believe this. I thought I was part of their squad. This doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't they include me? Why wouldn't they invite me? Oh, man, is it they just don't like me? Am I like a pity friend? They just pretend to like me? Is this how it's always been? Like they just sort of include me because they feel sorry for me, but then when I'm not around, they make fun of me. Maybe even right now during the sleepover, they're making fun of me, and maybe it happens constantly. And actually, this reminds me of last week at school. I approached them in the lunchroom and they were chatting, and it really feels like they just abruptly changed the topic. Maybe they were talking about me. And this reminds me of another incident the week before. And actually, I remember so many instances now where this just keeps happening to me. I don't fully fit in. I don't fully belong anywhere. I'm a reject. I'm a loser. I'm on the outside, and that's just how it's always gonna be. Well, you saw how quickly that just devolved into chaos. I just spun out. And that happens in adolescence. I remember doing that, and you remember doing that. But ideally, we want our kids to lean over time into a more resilient mindset where the interpretation could go like this. Oh man, they had a sleepover without me. Well, that really hurts my heart, but maybe there is a good reason for this. Maybe they got together after lacrosse practice and I couldn't go because we were on vacation. And the mom said you could have a couple other girls over. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal at all, really, because I mean, I could talk to my mom right now and we could organize an epic sleepover for this upcoming weekend. And I can invite whoever I want and it's going to be amazing. So no big deal. So that would be obviously a better mindset. Now, typically teens, tweens, they're not oriented in that direction, but we want to help them lean in that direction. And it could be tied to your family values, trying to be more optimistic. It could be tied to faith, if that's important in your life. There's a number of things that you can use as anchors to help them have a resilient mindset. But I encourage you to do that. It's not going to happen naturally. Here are my favorite books related to resilience. Happy to follow up with you about any of these. Of Human Bondage is one of my favorites. It's a literary classic, and it's about a boy named Philip Carey who had a physical deformity. He had a club foot. And he wanted to fall in love with this girl, and he wanted to have a successful life and career. And he struggled with insecurities and failures and so much. But I still remember Philip Carey, and that storyline still inspires me to this day. The point is, books can change us. Books can change your kid. Here are my favorite movies or shows. You have seen many of them, but have that conversation about how can you be inspired to be more resilient, to rise up, to overcome, to soar above. Whatever language you use, make sure you have that conversation the next day or that night, if possible. That's my dad. My dad came over from India without really knowing a soul because he wanted a better life for his future kids, which would be me and my sister, who's featured in the picture next to him. My point here is that you have stories of resilience in your own life. I want you to look for opportunities to share those stories. I know it's tricky. I know your kids might roll their eyes and start to sigh, but look for those opportunities, because then down the road, some opportunity will present itself and your child will remember that their stepmom or their stepdad or their uncle or their grandpa or their grandma, whoever it is, they rose up and that they can do the same thing. One of the techniques I use when I'm working with students is called worst case scenario. So they come to me and they say, this is what happened. Someone posted this really, really cruel message or comment underneath this photo that I posted. So then it's like, okay, what is the worst case scenario here? Are you going to lose all your friends? Is everyone going to make fun of you? Not just today, not just this week, but for the rest of the school year. And then over the summer, they're going to keep reminding you of it. And it's going to continue on through next year. And then as you move on into the next school and then into college, and are you never going to be able to fall in love? Is all the work that you've done to get good grades going to be invalidated? You know, take them to the worst case scenario. And of course, we want to validate what happened, of course. But we need to remember that they like to catastrophize, and we need to walk them back to help them to realize that, okay, this isn't too bad of a deal. It's not going to completely ruin our lives, even though it might take a few days to just sort of survive through. And that reminds me of this next point. Now is not for forever. Sometimes you just have to hang on for a little bit, because the news cycle will change in your elementary school, in the middle school, and even in the high school. It'll change soon enough. And then when we're growing up, we think we have a lot of control, but that's an illusion. Plus, we think that so much matters, but that's also not true. So I really like this meme Venn diagram that I saw, because help your kids to understand, okay, what are the things that truly matter in their life? What are the things that they can truly control? And then what is the overlap? That's what they should focus on. And it helps to provide some direction and specificity, and helps to sort of refine next steps. Otherwise, again, you spin out. There's just so many possibilities of what to do. I mentioned anchors before. One of the activities I like to do with kids involves just using a search engine to find a list of values online. These are just, let's say, 18 of them. You could use a list of 50. You could use a list of 100. But let's say I use this list of 18 or so. I give them to my child or a student, and I say, please circle your top 3, top 5. Let me know which ones you are like, yes, I love these. This is who I am. This is who I want to be. This would be the best version of myself. This is what I want to keep aspiring to, because I just love what these stand for. Because I'm built the same way. It's just who I am. So then when they identify that, I want to be someone who's grateful. I want to be someone who is hopeful, even when things look really, really crappy. I want to be someone who still chooses hope, even though it takes a lot of courage. I want to be someone who's honest, even though I like to lean in the direction of avoiding conflict. Like I feel like sometimes honesty is important. Like it's really important, actually, not sometimes, always. Anyways, help them to identify the core North Star principles that they want to build their life upon. And then when it feels like life is an emotional roller coaster and you can't control anything, help them to come back to what they can control, which is building upon these values. Figuring out, okay, what are my anchors? Let me keep coming back to them. This is what I need to focus in on. A couple things related to screen time. 20 years ago, there was this very popular band called Linkin Park, and they had this popular song called Breaking the Habit. And I always think about it when I think about screen time and negative habits. Well, generally speaking, if we do the math, teenagers, it's about 17 years of age. 13 to 17 years of age is what we're talking about here. But still, we're seeing tweens grow in their usage of technology. So 6 to 7 hours per day equals 280, 300 or so hours per month. And, doing the math. And so let's just say it's about 2,500 hours per year. That's actually about 105 days. Can you imagine what we could do with 105 days worth of time? added to our lives because we didn't spend any time on social media, that is incredible to even fathom. So for kids who have lost control, we want them to admit that it's a problem. We want them to leave their phone elsewhere, and you could buy them an alarm clock. You don't need your phone to be your alarm clock. When you set up screen time limits, we just cannot ignore them or override them. And I think do not disturb is useful if you get a lot of notifications. I grayscale my phone. I don't know if you can see it right now, but it's grayscaled, meaning if you just, for example, if you have an iPhone, you just tell Siri, please turn on grayscale mode. And then to be honest, it's not very attractive to me, so I don't really want to pick it up all the time and be wasting time on it. Delete the most problematic apps, and then I personally turn off all push notifications, except for texts and phone calls, because I don't want to be disturbed all the time. I can't get anything done. And then I want to keep reminding our kids as they're on social media and they follow a peer at school or an athlete or celebrity, but when that peer or athlete or celebrity's content comes across their feed and makes them feel bad about themselves, well, unfollow that account. If it's not serving you, please unfollow it. You shouldn't allow these things to ruin your mood or to affect your mental health. Tech-free zones in a house are important, of course, and then I'll talk about minimalistic phones here in a second. And then accountability and rewards also matter. They matter to me. I need accountability and I need rewards. I alluded to this at the very beginning about how we want our kids to use these technologies as tools. We don't want them to be the tool. And so please help them. We're doing this 1,000 Hours Outside Challenge. Perhaps you've read this book by Ginny Yurich. We started at the end of January. And just about 2 weeks ago, we went to the ice cream store because we knocked out the first 100 hours. On the website, you can get a number of worksheets, which are basically just coloring pages. And it's got 1,000 little spots in a picture that you color every time you knock out 1 hour. So let's just say we're probably at about, on the other side is the rest of the 900 hours. We're probably at about 140 or so hours. Let's just say by the end of the year, I only get to about 315 with my kids outside. That's still wonderful. That's still an amazing, amazing accomplishment, only because we were intentional about setting a goal of 1,000 hours outside. Screen time is a tug of war. I get that. Please, please be gracious to yourself. And then you just want to have rules. These are very simple rules, which I'm sure you already have in your home. Yes, I care about your grades, and I don't want your technology use to compromise it. Same with you doing your chores. And of course, the designated location at night is simply so that they don't give up sleep to be texting back and forth or FaceTiming or Snapchatting back and forth at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. And maybe you ask them to pay 10% of the cell phone bill every month, just as a periodic reminder that it does cost you something. It is a privilege and not a right. This is about driving behaviors. Across our nation, 80% of parents speed, 40% of parents text while driving, and 21% of parents across the nation don't wear a seatbelt sometimes. Our kids will model what we do and not what we say. So this, of course, relates to driving, but also phone use. So just keep that in the back of your mind. They're watching us constantly. And then work with each child individually about what it takes to earn screen time. If there's a negotiation process, then there's buy-in from both sides, instead of, as the parent, you say, my way or the highway. Work with each child individually on what it takes. And then ask yourself these simple questions. Are they doing well with their health, socially, academically? Do they have a number of hobbies? And are they learning when they use digital media? I use YouTube most recently to learn how to do the 4x4 Rubik's Cube because I already knew how to do the 3x3 because of YouTube. So that's amazing. And I'm so proud of myself, but they're always learning too. So don't throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. Establish a judgment-free zone in one room of your house so that whenever a heavy conversation needs to be had, you move to that room. And your kid knows that there's not going to be any judgment with words or even with body language or tone. And then use these resources, which again will get you. One is a tech use contract with expectations for the child and for the parent to be reasonable, to be involved, to not take drastic measures, etc. We also have scripts showing you how easy it is to have conversations with your kids about heavy online topics. We'll make sure that you get these as well. You're not going to act them out in a skit-like fashion, but it'll give you some conversation points. We also have a number of scenarios focused on different platforms and different forms of harm. With these scenarios, in this case involving hurtful statements, sadness, and a game called Overwatch, only because other kids are picking on him through a microphone and a headset while he's gaming online, well, then it comes with these follow-up questions, every one of our scenarios. The point with these follow-up questions is to help your child come up with an action plan of knowing what to do. Otherwise, they will tell you they know what to do, but they don't actually know what to do. So work through these scenarios with them. For youth who already have full access, you can still reestablish expectations and rules in your household because they're still under your roof. Negotiate what it'll take to not lose device time. And then if you're on these platforms that they love, ask to follow them. And on each of these platforms has parental controls. I can send you how-to videos or guides which will walk you through what to do if you want to set this up. Use our scenarios, use our questions parents should ask document, and then convey to them that you're trusting them. And try not to, again, always be negative, but be positive, be encouraging, because it brings them joy. They don't want you to be someone who's always negative about it. I'm a fan of a software program called Circle Plus by a company called Aura, which allows you, as you see on the right side of this chart, to toggle on and off access to certain apps and games and platforms, and to very specifically control how many hours, how many minutes, more for older kids, maybe less for younger kids, turn off at dinner time, turn on weekends, longer than weekdays, etc. I also like Bark. You can check out this piece of software and learn more about it for monitoring of messages. And for youth who are just starting out, because I know we have a lot of parents who are K through 8, establish rules, of course, and negotiate what it'll take to not lose device time. I'll mention these minimalistic phones here in 1 second, but I would give them access in time when you feel they're ready to texting, see how they do. Then to an app or a game, then see how they do. 6 months later, they haven't violated your trust, give them more privileges. We all wanted more freedoms and privileges as we were growing up. Use our scenarios, ask these questions, tell them that you are trusting them, and then be positive and encouraging. All of these minimalistic phones that you can buy, they run Android. You can install Duolingo, Kindle, all these educational apps. They look like a normal smartphone, like an Android phone, like a Pixel or something like that. And then it just allows you to have much more control. So Gab, Trumi, Bark Phone, Pinwheel, you can look these up at your leisure. Again, you'll get these slides so you can follow up. Document, that simply means screenshots. Take a screenshot on phones, on Apple Watches, on the gaming console, make sure they know how, make sure you know how, if there's ever any problematic content. The school needs that to investigate if it's a peer from school who's the aggressor, and the platform needs it to get the content taken down. Also set up screen recording in your control center on your Apple phone or your Android phone. If you need directions, follow up with me and I'll send you a video on how to do that. But we would need the TikTok video, the Instagram reel, the YouTube video, the live stream on Twitch, whatever it is, the video content, if it's problematic, hateful, threatening, as digital evidence. We're almost done here. I'm keeping an eye on the time. Just one more major topic, but before I get to that, remind them to block and report and mute. In every platform, they do have that functionality. They just need to use it. My last topic is generative AI. Kids are embracing these technologies, and maybe you have as well. I would imagine based on where you live, you likely have. This is brand new data from Common Sense. 70% have used generative AI. And by the way, those of you who are parents of K through 8th graders, they're going to start experimenting if they haven't already. The takeaway from these numbers to me is that they're still very naive. We still have, 1 out of 3, 2 out of 5 who have been misled by fake content. Almost 1 out of 3 don't know if they're talking to a chatbot or a human. So you can understand, taking that to its logical conclusion, that they can be fooled, they can be duped, and that could lead to victimization. This is just a picture I made for my little girl Maya because she loves unicorns. It was a little while ago, but my point is that generative AI is fun. But we also know that it could be harmful. We remember what happened to Taylor Swift and other celebrities last year and this year, but also this is happening amongst youth. Virginia, Texas, New Jersey, Florida, because there's apps available would just allow you to take images of your fully clothed peers and then have those images create fabricated new images of those peers without any clothes on. You understand? So we've got to have conversations with our kids about these topics, not in some fear-mongering way, but just about positive and negative uses and how it's a privilege. And then I've written about this, but you can go into the App Store or the Google Play Store and download a number of apps which allow you to create these social chatbots. I'm collecting new data on this right now, so please follow me and I'll give you more updates over the course of the summer as we analyze our data. But our kids are able to customize the look, customize the replies. Sometimes they're inappropriate, sexual, etc. Sometimes they're used in very innocuous ways just to get advice and tips, but about living, about a crush, but sometimes they're used in inappropriate ways. So we want to be having these conversations. Co-use these tools with your kids so that they know you have familiarity and are not oblivious. Talk to them about what they're typing in as inputs. Talk to them how the outputs from these systems or models could be completely fake, could be what are called hallucinations. And then they should always critically evaluate what is spit out instead of just parroting it back. Talk to them about plagiarism and about citations, how they need to always cite their use of these tools and disclose it to their school. And be skeptical because a bot is not a human. And then trust their heuristics, their ability to sort of detect that, wait a second, this doesn't seem totally legit or authentic. And then stay involved. I know it takes a village, but obviously Parent Venture is here for you. I'm here for you. We want to continue to come alongside of you and support you in any way that we can. So with that, I'm going to ask for questions. Here's my contact information, but again, don't worry, we will get that to you so you can reach out at any time. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me, and I'll turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Samir, for that incredible discussion. And parents, he's serious. If there is something that you want to ask and you email him, he will reply. We love Dr. Hinduja for that reason. Nobody else does that. It's kind of amazing. So, Samir, you take, and this is one of the reasons why we love your work, you take a very holistic approach to kids and technology. I think many parents joining would not think that you would be talking about values, family values, the things that they need to remember about themselves when they get into something like a cyberbullying. What brought you to this more holistic viewpoint?
Well, as you know, I'm big into academic success. And so obviously I would focus on reading, writing, arithmetic, and all of the other aspects that build upon that. But then as you get older, you realize the power of soft skills, social and emotional learning. And that relates to empathy and hope and resilience and moral development, having a moral compass. And you realize that actually leads to more success in life than just being super smart. Because it's about relationships. It's about being able to carry yourself and articulate certain points in a way that's kind and makes the other person feel valued. So that's something that I had a sense about, but as I've studied it scientifically, the research shows its value. And so we have to continue to focus on that as well. And my hope is that parents will say to themselves, that's how I want to raise my kids anyways. So I'm just going to keep majoring in that area.
So true. You know, we recently hosted Dr. Jamil Zaki from Stanford, who wrote a new book called Hope for Cynics. You may have read about it, but his point is that we are actually much more positive about each other than we think we are. So he recommends hopeful skepticism, and you brought that up today too, which is a lovely way of saying, you know, remember, people do mostly have your best interest at heart. They're mostly kind if you can just remember it. Like he did a study at Stanford where he said, how many of you would help someone? 3/4 said yes, but they didn't think that other people would. So he put up posters saying, 3/4 of you want to help each other. Here's how you connect.
Yeah, I love that. It's a social norm. We need to change people's perspectives of what they think the norm is and tell them that no, actually, people do want to not be a bystander, but an upstander. People do want to help, etc.
So what you're saying, as I understand it, is if something happens with your child, online, cyberbullying, whatever, the most important thing is for that child to trust you, so they'll come to you if something has happened. Yeah?
Absolutely. I just feel that they're surveying the landscape to find an adult who's safe. And they're so nervous about choosing the wrong adult where they will feel judged or condemned even. And so, yes, if you can convey to them that, look, maybe we've had some hard conversations and I have judged you in the past, but we're starting anew today. And I want you to know that I'm your biggest fan. I am, a cheerleader in your life and I love you unconditionally. And I just want to help you because I know growing up is much harder than I could even imagine. So please give me a chance to come through for you.
Okay, because when we started educating about this topic almost 20 years ago, it was more about what the apps are and what they look like and what they did. But the ball game seems really different now, doesn't it?
It does. And again, many parents are overwhelmed and they don't want to feel all this pressure to learn about the next app or the next device. And so, again, it's those soft skills which they're naturally going to want to teach. I just want them to be more intentional and use strategies, whether I've suggested them, whether they follow up with me for additional ones. And then many of the individuals who've been on the Parent Venture events, they should take the time to watch them because there's many, many applicable strategies that they've shared as well.
There are indeed. So, Dr. Hinduja, do you come down more on the side of parental controls? What if you're a parent that is really sort of reluctant to track your kid? What do you suggest?
So there's that fine line that all parents have to walk between. I want to be a parent, but I also want to kind of sometimes be a friend so that they're comfortable talking to me. I do lean still in the direction of a parent because they unfortunately make decisions without thinking about long-term consequences. And so I will spot check phones. I will spot check tablets. I will make sure I spot check browser histories. And we'll continue to have conversations about, okay, just come to me. If something pops up and it makes you feel freaked out or nervous or uncomfortable, just keep coming to me. That's all I ask. But yes, I'm going to be involved and I'm going to be checking. Please do that. Otherwise, kids you give them an inch, they will take a mile. And it's not because we're believing the worst about them. It's only because they're curious.
Well, you said something important there, Samir, and that is tell your kids. I remember Dr. Devorah Heitner early on saying to parents, okay, listen, if you're going to track kids, remember, you've got to tell them, because if you find something, then what?
Exactly. You want to make sure that they believe that you trust them and they trust you. Otherwise, relationship will fall apart.
Yeah, and also if you've got a kid who's kind of new to an iPhone and they've got something like Snapchat, parents, you can ask to follow them, but a really good piece of advice is to do it and then never appear.
Yeah, and again, Snapchat and these other platforms have those monitoring tools. Now, you will not be able to see the contents of their messages because that's, the platforms are very focused on maintaining privacy for their users, but you will know, for example, who they've recently followed and whether they filed any reports. And then that could be a talking point for you where you say, oh, I see that you filed a report. It must mean that you had a bad experience on this platform. Do you want to just chat about it? Just know that I'm here for you if you do.
Okay, I like that. And keep saying it, right? I'm here for you if
Absolutely.
you do.
Keep reminding them.
So, Samir, you also mentioned something that I like about being curious about what their games are, what the platforms are. I remember one of the founders of My Digital Tattoo, her son, who is a gamer, saying to her, you go to my brother's soccer games, but you never ask about my games.
I
And
love
I think
that.
that's a point well taken, right?
It really is. And I always think to myself, I'm just going to be very honest. My wife is a foodie. And so I don't really care about food. Please don't judge me. But in order for me to demonstrate love towards her, I need to be interested in the things that she's interested in. Similarly with our kids, maybe they're into comic books, maybe they're into gaming, and you're like, this is kind of a waste of time. And of course, that's very judgmental, but maybe your mind goes there sometimes. If you're honest, you still need to demonstrate interest in what they're interested in because you love them.
Yes, and there's always something that you can find, right? As a parent,
Absolutely.
I believe.
Absolutely.
We one time had a dad say, but what if it's just boring? And I was like, doesn't matter.
Please don't say that. Yes, exactly. I love sports. I love my professional sports teams, and my wife probably pretends that she cares more than she actually really does about my favorite sports teams. but that's because she loves me.
There you go. So, again, Samir, we've come to the end of our hour. With you, it always goes so fast, but this is our favorite question. And for somebody like you, I really want to know the answer. And that is, after everything you have studied and researched and written about technology, what gives you hope today?
What gives me hope today? Well, I don't want this to be trite, but you have definitely seen this growing movement where youth are talking more about social justice issues on social media. They're speaking out about matters that are really important to their hearts. They're looking at the least of these, so to speak, those who are less fortunate, and wanting to elevate them. And I just think that's really cool because sometimes we think that empathy is completely lost in this new generation, Gen Z or Gen Alpha, but I don't think that's actually true. So all that I'm asking though is that, okay, that's right now. Life might harden them. What can we do to keep their hearts soft and receptive and empathetic as they grow older? You know, let's keep cultivating empathy. Let's keep making sure that they do care about others and not just building their own kingdom and themselves.
I think those are really beautiful words and a great way to end our session today. So, Dr. Samir Handuja, always such an honor and a delight to have you with us. And parents, thank you. Educators, thank you. Everybody who's been on with us tonight. This video and resources again that Samir is offering will be coming your way soon as this video gets processed. And do take 30 seconds to stay online and answer a couple questions. Samir, thank you again for a really beautiful session. Take care, and we hope to see everybody again soon. Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.